Welcome back to Friday Night. Tonight we delve into the significance of the National Tree Growing or Planting Day in Kenya and its impact on our environment. And joining me in studio is Environment Cabinet Secretary Soipan Tuya. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lillian, for having me.
Karibu sana. Now, the 2 days notice before the National Tree Planting Day, it seems like a little bit of short notice, as well as the involvement of the public this time. Last year, we saw a lot of engagement and a lot of calls from the government for the public to participate in the planting of trees. Very different this time round.
This time round was extraordinary by all standards. I mean, we were in the middle of a crisis, the floods. We thought that, even in the crisis, it was also time to just pause and say, what is it we can do around our tree growing program to make sure that the next cycle of flooding does not hit us as hard as it has this time round. And really, granted, Lillian, we could not tell people to stop and plant trees when we were in the middle of crisis, when the floods were still raging across the country. So when we got the indication from the meteorology department that this week was going to really slump in terms of the precipitation, we thought it's the best timing. And the reason we are doing this, of course, is to have Kenyans see the seriousness of tree growing, but also to stand in solidarity with the 260 Kenyans that have lost their lives. Mm-hmm. From the ministry side, we plant trees all through, but on a lower scale. But because of the target that we have of 15 billion, that is why we have to ensure that it's all hands on deck. Right.
And now this 15 billion target by the government has been met with both optimism and skepticism. Mm-hmm. We're looking at people planting how many trees a day, essentially. So how realistic is this if we're looking at the year 2032?
15 billion is entirely realistic. And I'm very optimistic that we can do this. And going by the enthusiasm, the support that we have gotten from Kenyans during this second time when we have announced a tree growing holiday, it is very promising. If we all really committed to this cause, we are 50 million Kenyans, 50 plus million Kenyans. And if everybody committed to doing their bit, it only amounts to 300 trees per Kenyan in 10 years. Uh-huh. It is a small thing to ask, really.
Okay, those are the numbers. However, we are living in the advent and in the era of urbanization. Yes. And we're seeing a lot of evolution of brick spaces all around and very little regard for green spaces. Mm-hmm. So in terms of actually even getting the space, the land acreage, the land mass to make this a reality in the advent of urbanization mm-hmm. and demand for housing, a growing population as well.
It is important for Kenyans to know that the strategy around growing 15 billion trees is very well thought out. Even previously, in the previous government, the target was to reach the 10% constitutional threshold. Our forest cover stands at 8.8%. The Constitution requires that we hit 10%. So that has been the target around which we have been working, even in the previous administration. But the Kenya Kwanza administration has been very intentional in prioritizing matters climate change and climate action for obvious reasons. And I don't think any Kenyans now need a lot of explaining or convincing that we are living in a very critical stage of the climate crisis. And therefore, the 15 billion strategy is really a catapult from the 10% that we've been working towards. It is well thought out in the sense that we have degraded spaces in this country, both at the level of gazetted government forests, and it stands at 38 million hectares degraded spaces. The 15 billion is only targeting 10.6 million hectares, just a very small bit of what is available for restoration. So the space is there. Mm-hmm. I mean, in urban spaces, it's limited, And that is why you didn't see a lot of activity in Nairobi County, because there is only limited space that we can do tree planting. But across the country, we have so much more than what we are targeting with the 15 billion.
We didn't see a lot of that activity in Nairobi County, but the concern, Waziri, is that the CBD and the metropolis is expanding outwards. And so you find spaces that were previously green spaces, open spaces, being taken up by developers. But aside from that, in terms of engaging people, we talked about this being short notice and Kenyans not really being aware. In fact, if anything, Kenyans are very happy that it's a public holiday, or at least that's what we see around with the hashtag National Tree Planting Day. But in terms of civic engagement, how to convince Kenyans that this actually matters, what is the ministry doing?
It is a work in progress. And I must say that this holiday, this second holiday, is a huge improvement from the last time. And what we need to have Kenyans understand is that we've been planting trees in this country year in, year out. And if we were doing it the right way in terms of planting and nurturing trees to maturity, we would first of all have not seen the magnitude of crisis around flooding that we have seen today, and we would have very little of spaces to plant trees. So we are emphasizing on doing things right. And in terms of better preparedness this time round, we are deliberate. The cabinet secretaries, by directive of cabinet, have been instructed to actually take a frontline approach, and that's what we did. Today we had all the cabinet secretaries, of course led by His Excellency the President, the Deputy President, and all national government administration officers out in every county was covered. And Lillian, it is not a one-off. By instruction of cabinet, again, each CS has a designated site, and that's where they went out to today. And we are going to have each one of us set a day of a month to go back to our sites, make sure the trees are growing and are being nurtured to maturity. So on Monday, we already have a calendar of the CSs that are going to go out, starting with the Attorney General Muturi, because next week is the second week of the month. So we have a schedule. AG Muturi will be on Monday, CS Machugu on Tuesday, CS Mvuri on Wednesday, CS Mutua Thursday, and Friday CS Chirchir. And it's going to be a continuous exercise. So
it's a continuous exercise, but today what we noticed from Emily Chebet's report earlier is that the exercise largely took part in education and religious institutions. Why is that?
I don't think that is true. Maybe that is where she covered. But the reports we have, and the reports are coming in, the National Government Administration through the Ministry of Interior are assisting with getting us all the information from all parts of the country. The cabinet secretaries and the communities that came out to support in the tree planting were in government gazetted forests and wetlands. So for those that did it in religious institutions and schools, well and good. Those are spaces that we need to take as part of the tree growing activity, including private farms. We need our farmers to come up, and even in our own backyards, every available space, we should target to grow trees around.
Conservationists, Waziri, are also concerned about the planning and availability of specific seedlings, because different areas and different zones are suited to different seedlings. And so you find that not all seedlings will do well in particular regions. So the affordability of this, as well as the achievability of it as well.
That is true, and it is extremely critical that we have species to site matching of the trees we are growing around. That is the preserve of my ministry through the Kenya Forestry Research Institute, which we have been very deliberate in enhancing capacity for, because like I say, this is a big leap from the 10% we've been working on and now 30%. That requires a lot of support for the specialized institutions like KEFRI, the Kenya Forest Service. That is their preserve of mandate in terms of guiding Kenyans at every level to make sure we are planting the right trees and planting right. And it starts right from the work of KEFRI of ensuring we get quality seed. And the target to also make sure that at least 20% of the 15 billion goes to fruit trees. Another 20% goes to fodder trees, which will be grown in the arid and semi-arid areas. And we are also looking to employing technology, because the magnitude of a target that we have cannot really be achieved just by the manual planting of trees. So we will be moving on to technology. Yep. So really to tell Kenyans, the intention is really to shift the country from the casual nature that we have handled tree planting to really a life and death, because that is what it is.
I want us to end on the note of the casual nature, which perhaps we are perceived as handling this as a country. And global change and climate change being a global phenomenon, there are concerns that this push is more aimed towards raising funding and pleasing the Western world. We are the benefactors. They will benefit in a way or two in terms of us jumping onto the bandwagon, which is their push to really conserve the environment. So how to bring this closer home and make this a Kenyan problem that Kenyans identify with and relate with?
Unfortunately, there is no way to bring it closer than what it is right now. Really, if anybody thinks that an action that would lead to mitigation against the cyclic droughts that we are facing in the country, the cyclic flooding, is about pleasing the West, I think really that is very misplaced. It is a matter of ensuring that we mitigate against the effects of climate change. And we know that, Lillian, Kenya and Africa is the most hard hit, because our economies are dependent on, they are climate reliant economies. Agriculture, food is reliant on climate. So really the act of growing trees, and it is not, we are talking broadly about nature-based solutions, not just planting trees. There is much more, and even our strategy is bigger than planting trees. But tree growing is the lowest hanging fruit that we can employ to really mitigate against the extremities of climate change. So it is really for us, and that's why I was saying the other day, every Kenyan, we really appeal that we take responsibility for this, because it is for posterity. The shade you are enjoying right now in your backyard is because somebody preserved that tree, planted and preserved it for you. So we need to be living a better environment for our children tomorrow. And one simple way that every one of us can converge around is ecosystem restoration and really stopping the destruction of our ecosystems across the country.
We thank you so much for finding time on this National Tree Growing Day to be with us here on Friday night. That is Environment CS Soipan Tuya with us in studio. Remember, the government reserved today as a National Tree Planting Day. It is not a one-day exercise. You're urged to continue with this exercise every other day in the different green spaces where you find yourself. We're taking a very short break. We're back with more in just a bit.